One of the industries most affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is the food industry, through rising freight costs, plastic packaging and increasing fertiliser costs. Now, to get a sense of what that means for our food prices, this week on That's Business, we've got Pete Findlay, the CEO of Bega Group, the 125-year-old dairy company that also makes peanut butter and Vegemite. In preview, he reckons that we can expect 5 to 6% inflation as a result of what's going on in the Middle East. There are also some big trends in food consumption that he's also having to deal with. The rise in protein consumption and general wellness, but also the increase in the use of weight loss drugs. What's that doing to food consumption? And then there's also migration and global warming. So we tackle Pete Findlay on all of these issues and more. So here he is, Pete Findlay, the CEO of Bega Group. Well, g'day, Pete Findlay. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Alan.
No worries. And let's start with the Strait of Hormuz. How's the closure of the Strait affecting your business?
Oh, look, it's reasonably significant from a cost perspective at the moment, Alan. So we sort of look at it in two ways: the cost and then the actual supply of goods. So we've obviously focused on trying to make sure that our supply chains are standing up. We do import a lot of product, and a lot of product comes through that strait. So it's critical for us to be able to get packaging for our goods.
What do you get through what do you actually import through the strait?
All coming through there goes into a lot of our packaging products. So from there it goes into Asia and makes a lot of our resins for our packaging. A lot of chemicals for cleaning originate through those straits. So all the big clean downs we have to have on our plants every shift. A lot of inputs into rubber, so seals for a lot of our machinery and equipment sort of originates through those straits. So the first thing's been about just making sure that we've got supply and shoring up supply with either those businesses in Asia that receive the goods and turn them into product that we use, or finding supply elsewhere through either Europe or North America.
So what's the sort of average cost increase that you've seen so far?
So there's a cost impost just with our traditional suppliers where we can get product.
How much?
It varies, but we're seeing sort of 20, 30, 40% increase on those direct products, which then might sort of add an 8, 9, 10% increase on our products. So
and that's on your plastic jars and stuff, is it?
Yep. But the overall impact on total cost of products around about sort of 8 to 10%. And then you've got that's all of our plastics and our materials coming from overseas. And then you've got what's coming through our suppliers here in Australia, so all of our freight. So obviously we're in a process now where we're making sure that all of the freight coming into our business is supported through the cost increase. And so that's adding cost. And then our farmers. So we've separately to sort of the 8 to 10% cost increase we're getting through our suppliers. Our direct suppliers have then gone back to our farmers, and we're looking to support them with a sort of a step up in milk price to help support their costs. Their main costs are urea or fertiliser on their farms, which impacts their output significantly, and the fuel that they use in sort of day-to-day farm activities, sowing crops or feeding livestock or running their dairy through their generators. So
are you fully matching the cost increase that the farmers are seeing, or are they having to swallow some of the costs?
No, we're trying to fully match that. Yeah, so we've done a fair bit of work. So it depends. It's quite difficult. So we've different farmers in different regions have very different cost structures. So a farmer in a high rainfall area will mostly be using natural paddock-based fodder for their kilojoules for their cattle to produce milk, whereas a farmer in a drier area, less rainfall, does a lot of supplementary feeding, so they're importing wheat and grains, and that's they would be impacted more. But overall, we've tried to make sure that we've done an average cost at the higher end across our farmers, and we've worked across sort of all their different pricing structures to make sure that they're not out of pocket.
So across all this, you've got plastics, you've got freight, and you've got the actual milk, where you're having to pay more to the farmers. What's your average? What sort of cost increase? Is it 8 to 10% across everything that you're seeing?
Oh, it'll be yeah. So I'm just trying to think. It's probably our total cost base probably goes up. Our total cost base here is probably about 10%.
Right, and are you passing that on fully to consumers, or are you having to absorb some of that in your margin?
Not at this stage. So we're passing a large chunk of it on to consumers, but we are actually absorbing some of it at this stage. But we'll just have to see how long the crisis goes for. And so we're sort of evaluating that every month. We do calculations on that every month to assess the cost.
Just back to the Strait of Hormuz, what's your view about the long-term impact of this? And what happens if it stays closed for, I don't know, another month, another 3 months? What give us a sense of what you think will happen?
Yeah, we would probably so our first thing is getting supply materials. So I think that's the key thing. How do you make sure that we've got packaging, cleaning materials, we've got components to run our sites, and that our farmers are getting the right materials that they need. Are they able to get to fertiliser? Because that will impact their output. So I think the first thing is, how do we make sure that our supply chain stands up so that we actually get product? So that's what we're really focusing on. And then secondly, I think if it keeps going, costs will stay elevated, and then companies like ours will probably look to try and claw back more costs than what we potentially have today, because we just won't be able to absorb that. So there'll be pressure there. And then I think what probably happens is it starts to then spread across the other parts of the economy as we see. So it won't just be food, and it won't just be our manufacturing costs that are going up that then impact food costs. As you go through a wage cycle, you'll have to link your wages to increase cost of living. So I suspect wages will come under pressure to be elevated above normal wage increases. So I can sort of see it seeping deeper and deeper into our cost structures and probably impacting the broader the more elements of our business than what it is currently.
What do you think it'll do to overall inflation?
I think it'll drive inflation up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to what though? I mean, what do you think we're looking at?
I'm not an economist, Alan, but I would have thought north of 5%. Yeah, 5 to 6% would be my view. Just as I said, just as it spreads into our wages and into other parts of the economy. I don't think it's flowed fully through yet. So if it keeps going, I would think that inflation will be 5 to 6%, and maybe even higher.
One of the ways companies in the food business especially deal with cost increases is shrinkflation, where they have obviously smaller portions for the same price. Are you doing any of that?
No, we don't do shrinkflation. So we're pretty committed to our pack sizes, and so none of our pack sizes will be changing.
What do you think of shrinkflation? Do you think it's a bad idea? Do you oppose it? When you meet your food industry colleagues, do you tell them not to do it?
No, I mean, I try to stay out of their business. I've got enough issues and enough things to worry about running Bega, Alan. So I try not to give too much advice to some of my colleagues. But we've just found that value is one of our key drivers in our business. So how do we offer great product for a good price? So we have pretty intense productivity targets that we try and meet every year, and so that's just part of our business. And so we tend not to go for we never change pack sizes.
At the same time as all this is going on, there's some big changes going on in food consumption as well. I'm thinking particularly of the rise in protein consumption. It seems to have to be in everything now, and you've got a whole lot of new protein products, I think. How's that changing the way that food is being manufactured and consumed?
Oh, it's having a massive impact. So I'd say that protein's one of the the biggest trends we've seen in the last decade, and I think it's still got further to run. So I think it's part of a bigger movement in food. So I think people are becoming more and more sort of aware of how food and food consumption links to their lifestyle, and I think a lot more people are interested in wellness, and realizing that if they eat well, it improves their health outcomes, which improves their lifestyle outcomes. And so protein's a key element of that, but we're starting now to see that spread across a whole lot of things. So I think as we're growing older, Alan, my parents and certainly for much of my life, we were really worried about our lifespan, so how long we're going to live for. And so the big thing was to, retire at 60 and try and live to 70 or 75. Now people are living into their 80s and 90s, and what they're saying is, well, I don't just want to live for a long time. I actually want to live well. And so we've got this new term that we call health span. So it's lifespan. So how long can I live for, but how long can I stay healthy for? And therefore, if I'm healthy, I can still continue to do the things I enjoy doing. So, we see people as they enter their 40s and 50s wanting to keep up with their adult children, and then in their 60s and 70s wanting to do things with their grandchildren and maintain that active lifestyle. They're wanting to travel, they're wanting to exercise, and so we've got very different thoughts on what we're going to be doing at 60, 70, and 80 than what we used to. So people are wanting to eat well to enable that. So if you look at the key drivers of health span, it's weight control. So not carrying a lot of weight in your 40s and 50s and 60s, because that puts a huge amount of pressure on your heart and your muscles and your joints. And then it's also about maintaining muscle mass. So which enables you to stay active, to be able to walk and run and stay balanced and not fall and travel and lift things and stay active. So if you think about weight control and muscle mass, protein's a key element in that. So protein helps maintain muscle mass, which we all start to lose as we enter our 40s. And then it's also terrific for weight control, and particularly when you pair it with GLP-1 drugs, which are becoming a bigger and bigger part of life. Yeah.
I'll get onto those drugs in a moment. How much protein do you consume each day?
I try and have 2 grams per kilo. So without giving too much away, Alan, that's about 160 grams a day, which is probably at the top end of my requirements. But I find that it fills me up.
And how do you take it? What do you do?
A nutritious, dense
Bega protein bars,
protein dense diet, Alan. So I consume a Bega protein drink as I get up in the morning, which has got 30 grams, and I have a pouch of Bega yogurt or Farmers Union yogurt, which has got 16 grams. So I'm a quarter of the way there before I get to work. So and I've put about 300 calories into my system at the same time, which is pretty good macros.
One of the things that people are doing is people are trying to get away from manufactured foods, highly produced foods, more fresh foods. But that's what you do. You manufacture food. So are you seeing a decline in your sales simply because of that?
Well, so dairy, and we do a number of other products besides dairy, but dairy is actually a very natural product. So in yogurt, yes, it's processed, but it's processed through natural probiotics and fermentation, but it's still effectively milk. At the end of the day, it's highly nutritious, both from a fat, protein, and calcium and all sorts of good stuff in it. So we're actually finding that people are being more attracted to dairy, and we're actually seeing that dairy is having a little bit of a renaissance, which we're very pleased about.
And what do you have to do you began a 5-year transformation project 2.5 years ago, so you're halfway through it now, I think. So was that designed to deal with what you saw as the changing food habits of people, or something else? Was there a problem in the company that you had to fix?
It was. So what we did with our business, so Bega was the accumulation of several acquisitions. And so what we wanted to do initially with our business was just sort of pare it back and focus on some key things. We wanted to try and lift productivity. So, we're very much of the thought that if you think you need to take cost out, it's too late. So we wanted to really get on the front foot around cost and productivity. So we stripped it back to what we thought we were good at as a business, Alan, and that's running mainstream number one brands at a really good value and customer proposition. So we want to produce great quality product that meets or exceeds our customer needs every day, and we want to do that at scale. And so that's hence why our number one or number two brands, we like to operate in that space. So the first thing was one of our key requirements or expectations of our customers is that they can get a great quality product at great value. And so therefore you need productivity underpinning that value piece. And so we stripped a lot of cost back out of our business. And we compressed our factories, and we really sought to get a far more productive manufacturing footprint. And then from there, we wanted to really focus on areas that met our customer needs, and that wellness piece was a key part of it. So, how do we deliver those wellness concepts or needs to our customers, which are things like protein, fibre, the amino acids within protein. So, things like, in addition to that, magnesium, collagen. And so we picked our milk-based beverages and our yoghurt piece to really focus on there. And then the third piece of our strategy was to deliver dairy into Asia, in particular Southeast Asia. And so we use cream cheese and yogurt as a vehicle for that. So we've really focused on those components there, and we're really pleased to say that 2.5 years in, we're probably ahead of plan. And we're a pretty good chance of hitting our 5-year targets in year 4. So we've been sort of pleased with how that's been going.
You're closing factories too. I think you're going from 22 factories to 15.
Yeah.
And I think you've let hundreds of workers go as well, haven't you? I mean, are you shrinking the business? And how have you dealt with the people that you've had to retrench?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. And that's been a really, all those decisions are very difficult, and we don't take those decisions lightly. So we've removed about 800 heads from our business. So we've gone from a little bit over 4,000 employees to about 3,200. Those closing of those plants was basically closing down facilities that just didn't have enough product or productivity flowing through them, or volume flowing through them. So what we did was we've closed those facilities, and we put the volume into the existing 15 facilities, and that's enabled us to get a far better cost per unit through our whole product range. And so what it's meant then, that's actually enabled us to grow. So we're actually with sort of more than 800 employees and 7 factories less, we've actually grown the business from a volume perspective at more than 4% over the last 3 years. So we're actually producing more with less, which comes back to that productivity aim that we've been trying to achieve. And what it also means is that, with less factories, we've actually got less maintenance capital in our business. And so we've actually been able to, we've kept spending. In fact, we've actually invested more capital in the remaining 15 sites, and that's really about growth capital. So putting in equipment and capability that actually enables us to add more to our products and grow the business. So we've actually grown the business with less, which is sort of one of our philosophies. To keep driving productivity, we really think heavily about our asset turns, our return on funds employed, and how hard we can sweat our assets. So that's sort of been that piece. We've also employed people during that time. So whilst we've had to let people go, we've just made a significant investment. We've shrunk 2 factories into 1 in our cheese processing business, but we've actually employed some new people, and we've spent $50 million on the remaining site to make it far more competitive, and allow it now to hopefully grow under that new cost structure.
Just on those weight loss drugs, GLP-1 and all the rest, are you seeing much of an impact on sales now from those drugs?
Huge impact.
Huge. How much?
If you're on a GLP-1 drug, you're consuming a lot less. And so basically what that does is that strips fat from you, but it also strips muscle. And so what you want to be doing is the food that you are consuming, you want to be highly nutritious and you want to be high in protein to enable you to maintain your muscle mass, because whilst you want to lose weight, you don't actually necessarily want to lose muscle because it's terrific for your stability and your physical health. So we're seeing people on GLP-1 drugs wanting to consume a lot of yogurt and milk-based beverage with high protein content in it. And so when we bought the business, yogurt was sort of growing at 3 or 4% volume per year, which is nice. That's good. We're the number one yogurt producer in Australia, and we had sort of nice 3 to 4% growth over the last couple of years, sort of with the emergence of GLP-1 and it's not solely GLP-1, but certainly a big part of it. Our yogurt's now growing at sort of 10 or 11% volume year on year, and so it's having a significant impact on our business.
But is there also, across the food industry generally, are we seeing a decline in food consumption generally?
I couldn't tell you that. I couldn't tell you that in Australia, Alan. Certainly in the US, where GLP-1 drugs are now sort of 10% plus of the community are on GLP-1 drugs. The average family in the US with a GLP-1 drug user is consuming 6% less food. And so if you think about that, the US, that sort of equates to a 0.6% reduction in food consumption, which is significant if you think across that. So I would imagine that those sorts of outcomes will start to play out in Australia. I would have thought that we will follow the same GLP-1 user depth within our community, and I would have thought that our food consumption will drop. So, and people will turn to more natural, nutritious, high nutritious, dense foods. I would say from that.
Why do you think all these trends, the move towards more nutritious wellness and all this, and GLP-1 drugs and so on, mean for the Australian food and agriculture industry? I mean, our industry is really based on dairy and carbohydrates, and the idea of protein in Australia is basically a steak and a lamb roast. I mean, what do you think? What do you think it means?
I think it's fantastic. So I think it's got huge. So if you think dairy's really a protein carrier, dairy's got as much protein as fat in it, so it's a very high protein-based product. You've got two different types of you actually got a number of different proteins within dairy, all which meet protein users' needs. They're all whey protein and so forth. It's all very absorbable. And so I think that dairy is ideally placed for this protein consumption drive that we're seeing. You've got red meat, chicken, pork, all of our wonderful meats that we produce, which are great protein carriers. And then plant-based protein, I think, will become bigger and bigger too. So plant-based protein, which can be extracted from wheat and various different sorts of plants that we grow here. So I think Australia agriculture has a huge opportunity, not just with the protein movement that we're seeing in Australia, but I think the protein drive will happen across Southeast Asia. I think they're probably a little bit behind us, but not far. So I think Australia agriculture has a huge opportunity to supply protein into Southeast Asia and Northern Asia, and so I think it's a terrific thing for our agricultural industry.
Do we have does Australia have the cost base to do that?
Oh, I think we do. I think we do at the raw at the farm level. I think we're getting better in various areas. I think we're exceptionally good at broadacre cropping and beef and meat production. Dairy, we're becoming more and more competitive. And so I think that some of the evolution we've seen around scale that's impacted broadacre cropping and beef production, I think will start to flow through to dairy now. So I think we do absolutely. I think our farmers are becoming more and more advanced in the way they're farming and our techniques. If you have a look at some of the data, our production levels now are very high and much more resilient than what they used to be, even in terms of weather. And so, and I think we're getting some really good investment in the ag space. I think we've got a fair bit of work to do at our level at processing and manufacturing. So my great fear is that a lot of our product gets shipped offshore in its raw format, and that we don't add value to it through the manufacturing process. So I think we've got challenges to remain competitive as a manufacturer, but that's the challenge that we face, and we're certainly very keen to take on that challenge.
there's some pressure coming on the levels of migration politically, with the rise of One Nation and also housing affordability and so on. I mean, there's obviously been quite a large degree of migration over the last few years. Is your business and the food industry generally benefited from that, both in terms of consumer demand and also migrant workers? What will be the impact on the business generally and yours of if there's a big reduction in migration?
Yeah, so no, I think migration is excellent. So certainly from consumer demand, it's great, and we're very conscious of it. So I'm very pleased to say that our Farmers Union Greek style yogurt is extremely popular with people of some continent descent. So they love it in their curries, and we see a lot of people buying our product there, and we're also becoming more and more cognizant of creating product that meets those consumers' needs. So it's been terrific for our business. So we're certainly very pleased that we've got more consumers and consumers that enjoy our product. And it hasn't helped us quite as much from an employment point of view. A lot of our factories are in regional areas, so we would say that we still struggle in some areas to get employees. So we're doing a significant project in the Bega Valley, and that's been quite difficult. We've had to employ 90 new people into that factory there, which we're really pleased about. And supporting our communities and being part of our communities is very much part of our ethos and our history and our culture. But we would say sometimes it can be hard finding people to work in those areas and people with the right skills. A lot of our equipment's quite complex and we require a lot of trades to run our factories, so that can be difficult. So, and then what I would say is that getting labour out to our farms, our farmers find it very hard to get labour. And so as they scale their businesses to become more productive, so as their dairy farms or their citrus groves or become bigger, we obviously buy a lot of oranges as well for our orange juice business. They are having trouble getting the labour to help them scale. So I think there's still, we would encourage, we're certainly migration is really important, but we would encourage legislation that helps get that labour out to rural areas.
The last topic I want to cover off with you is climate change and global warming. Now, obviously, the policy here is still net zero by 2050, but that's going to require a lot of trees to be planted to sequester carbon. I mean, there's no way that they're going to get to net zero or zero without the net. That is to say, lots of trees being planted. And if you look at the what they're actually saying in the government's policy as to how much has to be planted, I worked it out to be like 2 Tasmanias.
Yeah.
And also there's going to have to be a whole lot of solar farms, wind farms, transmission across farmlands. I mean, what's all this going to do? It doesn't feel like we can have the same amount of agriculture in Australia while also being net zero by 2050. What do you think?
Oh, look, it's definitely a challenge, and it's definitely a challenge. I mean, we encourage our farmers to plant trees. So we love to see dairy farms with lots of rows of trees and farms with healthy biodiversity, healthy soil. So we're very much around farmers caring for their properties and their land and the environment in which they operate in. And to be brutally honest, dairy farmers are very much wide to that anyway. Most dairy farmers are actually do fantastic stuff with their properties because it's their main asset, and they want to keep it productive as well. So, we encourage planting of trees. We encourage protection of waterways through planting of trees. We do a lot of work with our farmers around creating sustainable farm practices, and by being more efficient.
But what about the methane emissions of cows? I mean, can Australia actually continue to be a big dairy producer while also being net zero ever?
Yeah, I think so. So a lot of work's been done around methane, methane emissions. What we find is with efficiency. So as farmers become more and more efficient, they tend to get better and better carbon outcomes. So, the more you can get a cow to produce each cow only produces the same amount of methane. So the more you can get a cow to produce actually makes your carbon emissions at a product level better and better. There's a whole lot of new farming techniques around sequestration of carbon within soil to help offset around cattle, the planting of trees. So we think there's a huge amount of work that can be done. Probably the bit that interests me is the energy piece and how we run our factories. And so we're working pretty hard on that. How do we eliminate gas from a lot of our factories, which are high gas users?
How do you? I mean, I was going to ask you what are you doing to reduce emissions?
Yeah, so obviously just try and make so going from 22 factories to 15 is a start. So that improves your emission footprint significantly. We try and spend capital on making our plants much more efficient. So a number of our factories are pretty old. So how do you keep modernising them to use their resources more efficiently, which not only has an emission benefit, but a cost benefit as well. And then we're doing some pretty cool stuff around how do we link up better with green energy and green electricity in particular, so that we can use that in time zones that benefit the green grid. And so we're doing some really nice projects, or looking to do some nice projects at the moment that will take away gas usage from our sites. We've got solar coming up on a number of sites, so we're just working through that. I think a couple of years ago it was difficult to see a linkage with sustainability and commercial outcomes, but more and more we're seeing that now, Alan, which I think is actually will accelerate our movement towards our targets. We've got 40% reduction by 2030. We think that's in hand, but I think the pleasing thing is that more and more there's really good commercial outcomes coming from sustainable practices.
Thanks very much for joining us, Pete Findlay.
Oh, Alan, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed the chat.
Thanks so much for joining me on That's Business. You can find That's Business on the ABC Business Daily feed every Friday. So you don't miss out, make sure you follow ABC Business Daily to find us on ABC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. Carrington Clark and the ABC Business Daily team will be back in the feed on Monday.